Hi there, so this is our second part in the Battle of the Utility for DPS classes for Legion. The first part, if you haven't seen it already, I would look at it. It gives the ground rules and an introduction. We did the plate classes then. The winner at the moment is Death Knight. However, remember what I said. If you think I've missed something out, it is very inexact science at the moment. We're pre-beta, although hopefully very close to beta. We're only going off data mined abilities. It is possible I missed something out. Wouldn't be the first time. When I was initially starting this, I actually thought Bloodlust had disappeared from the game. But not to be, as we will find out in this part. If you do think I've missed something out, or if you disagree with something, just put comments below. And then as long as it's before the final tally, if I agree with you, I may well change something, add something in, take something away. If we see an inconsistency, then by all means challenge that one. In this part, we're going to be looking at the male wearing classes. Now, there are only two of those, but not to worry, we've got plenty of utility to come. So we're going to start off with the Hunter. Okay, so with the Hunter, we're used to Hunters having a little bit of utility, especially based around traps and other cunningness like that. Sometimes their abilities provide utility with boss-specific mechanics, but I'm not going to include those because it requires a very specific designer boss. For example, Disengage. I'm not going to consider Disengage one because it's, although it was useful on fights such as Siegecrafter in Siege of Orgrimmar, generally speaking, I wouldn't class it as general utility. You need a specific mechanic to take advantage of it. So, what have we got? Well, Narrow Escape. This is for Beast Mastery and Marksman. Disengage also activates a web trap which immobilizes all targets. So it's, a way of routing multiple targets. Very handy utility. Obviously, it's utility to be used on a boss where there are multiple adds. Adds that might cause trouble, where we'd want to keep them in one place. And obviously, those adds have to be susceptible to this sort of crowd control. It's extremely useful where it comes in handy. You'd be thinking of things like one of the boats on Iron Maidens. I'm trying to think which one now. I can't remember the name of the boss. There are times when it comes in useful, but it is quite rare. Mostly when you have adds, you just sort of naturally want them to come to the boss and you AoE them down. You don't generally want to route them all into place, but every now and then you do. So what we'll say is extremely rarely used, but AoE, 4 points. But because it will be extremely rare that this would be needed, I'm going to knock it down to 3 points. Next one is Binding Shot. This is like an AoE stun, but, it's not a simple AoE stun to use. Fires a magical projectile, tethering the enemy and any other enemies within 5 yards for 10 seconds, stunning them for 5 seconds if they move more than 5 yards from the arrow. Again, it's a standard 4-part pointer. We're not going to use it very often at all, but it is sort of AoE. But again, because it's quite tricky to use. You need at least the added tethering to move around, or try and move around. And it will be rarely used as well. So again, I'm going to knock this down from 4 points. In fact, I'm going to knock this one down to 2 points, because I'm going to argue that someone else is likely to have something better. Misdirection. Again, another useful piece of utility, especially if they're going to be adds. You don't really need it for the boss at the start, although sometimes it's good practice. We're mostly thinking adds come in, think Blast Furnace, adds are coming in. It's not easy for the tank to pick them up because they're tanking something else at the same time. They don't want to be running around. Misdirect those adds to the boss. Extremely useful where it is needed. AoE ability, is it used very often? No. So we're going to give this 4. I will leave it at 4 because it is not very often used. However, when it is used, it's extremely useful. Although even in those cases, you could argue it's not always absolutely essential. So I'm going to get 4 points for that. Then the final one is sort of a newish one for survival. Tar Trap. Hurl a tar trap to the target location that creates a pool of tar around itself for 30 seconds. The first enemy approaches it, all enemies within 10 yards will be slowed by 50% while in the effects. The trap can exist for up to 60 seconds. So this is a great AoE snare, effectively, you'd use this in a situation where you've got a group of mobs and you just need to slow them down. So the first one that comes in triggers it, but anyone else with any other enemies within 10 yards are going to cop for the same effect. You can think here about the ghosts on Socrathar, the spirits that come towards you. AoE, so 4 points. It is the sort of thing that can happen reasonably often. Multiple ads spawning and you just need to sort of slow them down while you deal with them. But I'm not going to say it happens all that often, so I'm going to keep that one at 4 points. So very similar, all very similar utilities there, and that's what I think for the Hunter. Okay, on to the Shaman now. Well, where to start? Let's start with Lightning Surge Totem. Summons an air totem with 5 health at the target that gathers electrical energy from the surrounding air and then explodes after 5 seconds to stun all enemies within 8 yards for 5 seconds. So an AoE stun, but there is a fuse on it, there is a delay. But nonetheless, AoE stuns, these are always useful. So we would say 4 points because they're not used in the majority of fights. In a particular tier, I'm going to say that there are going to be some fights where there are ads and you'd want an AoE stun. But I'm not going to put it up to 5 because of that. I'm going to leave it at 4 simply because of the 5-second lead-in that's needed. This is not always good. It takes a careful timing. I'm not saying that without practice you wouldn't be able to get it bang on. I've seen Shamans do this in the past when they've needed to. But because of the difficulty, I'm going to leave it at 4 points. Next one is Ancestral Guidance. Now, when the Shaman deals direct damage or healing, 20% of that amount is copied as healing for up to 3 injured allies within 40 yards. Now, there isn't enough information in the tooltip for me to see exactly how this works, but it sounds like you could do reasonable healing in a situation where there's a lot of sort of raid damage going on, and this could certainly be helpful. I mean, it's difficult exactly where to sort of place it, because on the one hand, you would say, well, this is AoE. It's going to affect up to 3 injured allies. It can be used on any fight. Absolutely. So you'd be giving that 10 points. But it's an unknown as to exactly how powerful it is. And because the heal, I mean, you could use this. It's always very difficult for DPS. I've seen DPS players say, oh, I do this heal, I'm saving people's lives. We do not know ever that we are saving people's lives, even when we're directing a heal. Because for all we know, a healer is on top of it. Just because someone's health goes low doesn't mean they were in any serious danger. So, very difficult to know what the impact would be. For that reason, I'm going to consider it an unknown, and I'm going to put it down to 4 points. Next one, the ability that I thought had disappeared when I was first of all checking through, but no, I wouldn't have minded if this went away. But no, it's still there. Heroism. I'm calling it heroism. I know I'm horde now, but tough. So we know about this one. This is the big DPS raid-wide cooldown. So Shaman still keep this one. Absolutely 10 points. In fact, really, you should actually add more points onto this. But because Shamans have a lot anyway, I don't think they need the charity. I'm going to keep this one at 10 points. So easy. Next is Earth Grab Totem. So this is basically an AoE speed reduction. Not going to be used all that often, but I would expect it to be useful on occasions. Possibly more useful for elemental shamans who could be out where ads spawn in, rather than expecting an enhancement shaman to run out and drop it. But nonetheless, it will be used now and then. Not used hugely often, but it's an AoE effect and it'll be very useful when it is used. 4 points. Next is Purge. Single target fight. How often is it going to be useful? Probably not that much useful. So, you know, if it can be used, it's probably going to be essential that it is used. How often is it likely to be used? It might not be used for the whole expansion. So this is just a straightforward 1 point. Reincarnation allows you to resurrect yourself upon death. It's on the same par as a battle res, really, except it's very specific to you. So it's single target. Would be used on a fairly regular basis, so we'd say 7 points. But it's not quite on par with the battle res because it is only if the shaman themselves dies. But it does allow a shaman to sacrifice themselves. For example, black holes on Zul'Harak, and just get back up without actually using a battle res. So I'm going to say 6 points. I am going to knock it a point because it's not as good as a battle res. But at the same time, it does have usefulness and it can be used on a very regular basis, especially during progress. Oh, and we've still got more. Stormlash. Stormlash. Whenever you attack with your weapons enhanced, you have a chance to enhance up to 2 allies or yourself, seems to be totally random, causing attacks and spellcast to deal additional nature damage. So you're like buffing others. You might be buffing yourself, in which case it's not really utility, but you can be potentially buffing others as well, so I'll put this one in there. However, I'm going to say, even though it's up to 2 allies or yourself, it could just be 1 ally. It's a very small number, so I'm not really going to call it AoE. I'm going to call it single target. And because we don't know realistically how much extra damage is going to come out of this, I'm just going to give this 1 point for now, because it's a total unknown. Water walking as a friendly target, potentially AoE because we can buff up the whole raid. That being said, how often we like to use it? Almost never. You know, this is like going back. It has been useful in the past, but you would specifically need an expanse of water in the raid. Are we likely to get that in Legion? I don't think so. I can't rule it out. So for no other reasons, I'm just going to give that 1 point. And the final one is Windrush Totem. Summons an air totem, which continually grants all allies who pass within 10 yards of it 60% increased movement speed for 5 seconds. It's a bit like the Priest Feather, but AoE. And this would be really useful. So if everyone has to, like, imagine sort of seeds on Fell Lord, you could just plonk this at the right of the boss, and then if someone's bound to pass through it to get to their marker, and it gives them that old 60% speed boost for 5 seconds. Extremely useful. This is AoE. It's going to be used. I mean, this is the only thing we have to think about. It's not going to be used on every fight. We don't always need to run around on fights. But you are definitely going to have this used on several fights. I would say a tier. So it's not going to be used for every fight or even the majority of fights. So we're really knocking it down to 4 points. But because it's so awesome, and it's 60-second cooldown as well, you can use it very regularly, I'm going to give it an extra 2 points and call this 6 points. Okay. So that concludes the Shaman. Blimey, they've got a lot. So in the next episode, what we'll be looking at are the leather-wearing classes. It won't, unfortunately, include Demon Hunters because we simply do not know enough about them as yet. They haven't told us the full list of abilities. And we know a few, but I'm not going to do a half-assed one of them. But I'll continue with the current leather classes, the ones we know about. And as I said at the start, if you want to challenge any of my ideas, you sort of think there's some disagreement there, present your argument in the comments. Or if you think I've missed something out, put that in. Or if you think something shouldn't have been included, put that in. And if I agree with you, if your argument's strong enough, then I will modify it for the final tally. But until the leather wearing, which will be tomorrow, I'll see you later.